I never thought I would access the job that I have now because there's so many bureaucratic obstacles, there's so many barriers for Indigenous youth and red tape, and I never would have thought to even make those connections or try to go through all of these obstacles and pieces of tape that you need to get into these spaces.
Once they've completed their education or training, Indigenous young people may not always have access to meaningful work that's aligned with their goals and aspirations or that's close to their communities. Because of systemic barriers, many may be unable to remain in their field of choice or to pursue a livelihood that's consistent with self-determination and sovereignty. Indigenous-led organizations and those working in deep partnership with Indigenous youth, communities, and grassroots initiatives are developing new Indigenous models of employment and economic growth. As well, increasing meaningful opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurship is essential because Indigenous-owned businesses hire and retain Indigenous employees at a much higher rate. These businesses also embed Indigenous values and understandings of success into their unique business models.
Looking at our Indigenous young people and those concrete opportunities, it's first important to contextualize the barriers of which Indigenous youth face, and that is looking at a colonial history.
Historically, a lot of the doors have been shut to us, and programs and creating spaces like this creates that community and creates those spaces for us to contribute and share our solutions and experience. And not only were we left out of conversations, we had very little resources. There's a lot of economic restrictions placed on Indigenous people. And so while the rest of the country was growing and people were getting educated, and a lot of that was not accessible to people until recently.
I think that it's important to support Indigenous youth with mentorship opportunities where they're able to learn how to navigate the systems that are already in place. At CRE, we teach youth about how to navigate granting systems, how to work within policy, and I think it's also great that they can learn how to network and connect with other Indigenous youth who are also going into similar workforce.
I feel like I can actually change the world now, and I didn't have much hope for that a couple of years ago.
Looking at the importance of people to see a notion of belonging, relation, and connectedness to the learning, the work, and that knowing that culturally, with identity, that this young person belongs in this space, that there is room for them to be authentically themselves and to learn, to grow, to expand to infinite possibility, if you will. So that essence of belonging is the first piece.
The most impactful part of the program for me is the connection to the mentors, having those resources to hop on a call and ask questions to, or other resources that we've been provided is also the most important, I think, to having a successful project is kind of that support team behind you.
I've had a few mentors throughout my career, and especially the ones most meaningfully through the Generation Power program that have really helped shape me, who I am and how my career's developed. So it's only right that I can create space for other Indigenous and underrepresented groups, especially in government, to promote that change, promote inclusion, equity, diversity, and be that person that someone else can look up to.
With the fellowship, we are being mentored, but as we're coming to the end of the fellowship, we're realizing that we want to be mentors.
It really comes back to the youth empowerment model. Indigenous youth have all the skills to be able to do this and lead this clean energy transition, and that's the kind of work and the sector that I want to work in.
I think a moment of pride for us is seeing program participants coming back into our circle to share their experience and uplift the next generation of emerging entrepreneurs. And this is now contributing to a whole movement of Indigenous self-determination and business innovation. And there are so many young people who want to create opportunities for themselves in their communities. And when they hear stories of other people who have done it, then they really start to see the possibilities.
It's important that the people we are designing and building things for are present at the discussion so that we know, what their communities actually want, and we're including them in meaningful ways.
So as a team, we're working with community organizations, Indigenous youth from across the Atlantic to support them in breaking down systemic barriers. So working with them to create different programs. So essentially, we're just supporting and creating different opportunities that might not be readily available for Indigenous youth and having them really see what their options are in order to be successful in whatever way that looks like for them.
We've come to realize how important it is to center the personal well-being of entrepreneurs and acknowledge the courage it takes to venture out and do something totally different. There are so many young people who want to create opportunities for themselves in their own communities, and when they hear the stories of other people who have done it, they start seeing the possibilities.
That's really important to us, is just making sure that Indigenous youth are embedded into all facets, not just in the management of youth programming, the management of all organizations at a director level, at a board member level, at an advisory council member level. And so that's what's, I think, essential to making sure that Indigenous leadership, Indigenous youth leadership, is embedded in all facets of the sector.
Knowing what is possible, that dream destination of what can be, having role models and ideas to envision for the future. Next is the pathway to get towards that dream destination, the know-how, the resources, the support, and finally is the confidence to take the steps on that pathway towards that dream destination.
And if we're not constantly reviewing what we're doing and making changes to move forward, then programs are going to get stagnant and not adapt to the future. Because every year that these go on, the impact of these programs magnifies.